been so far?
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's been cool. Took a little getting used to, like, because it's like the biggest like cultural shift that I've done in a while. I mean, mostly I've just been flying around the United States or wherever, or driving around. So yeah, and then like so it's the edges are rougher here by an order of magnitude, but it's good that way. Like there's like it's an interesting, like you're right on the beach. In the States, everything here would be so expensive. So, and there's a different sort of pacing to everything. People concerned with, the little that we've interacted with locals and stuff. So yeah, there's like a cognitive weight to switching up that way, that, adapting to that, but otherwise it's been great. Like the area is cool for sure. Super pretty. Lots of stuff to wander around to. Got a local coffee shop we can go to. Tons of dogs.
Tons of dogs.
Ostrich.
An ostrich.
A depressing ostrich. Yeah.
Yep.
Parrots. Yeah.
It's like a big boy too. Yeah, like he has an enclosure. It's too small, but yeah. Just the fact that there's an ostrich in the neighborhood is a little bit, wow.
It's something. I really want to free it. It's going to be my
last day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like get some wire cutters and sneak over there and
Animal Liberation Front.
And then what? What is the like? Where's the ostrich gonna go? I don't know if that's better for it.
Yeah. I don't know if that's good or bad for the ostrich. Yeah,
that's true.
That's not my problem. I free the bird. Then the bird does what it needs to. I don't know. Eminent domain. It takes over the estuary and lives there. Oh. Yeah. Anyways, it's been cool. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
What else? What else, everybody? What have you been up to, CJ?
Kind of same old classics. Same old classics. Climbing and surfing.
There you go.
Climbing and surfing. I guess there's one update too, which is Chiaki and I are moving in together.
Wow.
Nice. So that's interesting. But
nice.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah.
In San Diego?
In San Diego. The price is just like ridiculous. And I haven't really slept at my house in like almost a month now. So
yeah.
Kind of natural.
Cool.
Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah, especially when I'm not having a lot of money. $700 for rent, pretty unbeatable, including like utilities for the most part. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Way to bond.
Yeah. Way to bond. What about you, Shahruz? How are you doing?
Good. Just same old as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. No major life events though since we last spoke.
There's always next week.
Right.
True. Very true.
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm still like digesting all the posts and it was like a weird 10 days because moving around and then like publishing in a style that doesn't really feel like publishing. It's just like barfing out things versus polishing things and where all that lands. And so, yeah, it's been an odd mix with all that. And then on top of that, moving around. But I mean, I like it. I think it's challenging and weird and all that stuff. So, yeah. And then sort of this morning we were at the coffee shop and I'm like reading through everybody's stuff and then having another brain explosion. It's just because, yeah, all the different angles. And then yeah, I don't know. That's where I'm at in a brain stew currently. Everything's sort of fizzing about.
Were you
Don't know
reading
what you
stuff
get.
on the site?
Yeah,
I found myself like on GitHub more.
really.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracking
Interesting.
changes, navigating, I don't know, seeing what's new.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do
the
it.
change log is difficult.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, like I was kind of hopping between the author pages, like
Mhm.
sort of seeing how people or like how that was structured rather than, and then like comparing that to the main feed, which is just chaos, obviously.
A
It's
little bit.
not scannable or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of just getting a feel. But yeah, I would then sort of, and then I have like GitHub desktop, where I'm like seeing who did what, using that as a sort of notification kind of thing. But like, yeah, interesting. What was so just like on GitHub, like on the site, or like where and how were you monitoring it?
I guess I was using Git more, but I don't write often, so I had to kind of like figure out what my setup was going to be.
Yeah.
I ended up just using VS Code and like the built-in kind of markdown there, and then just split the panel and put the preview on the right to make sure I wasn't messing up the markup at all. But then that gave me an easy way to just do like a Git pull and see like right there, like here's the new files that came in, and then I could just hop over to those and be like, all right, this is new. That felt like the cleanest. I definitely tried to use the site, but then I couldn't keep track of like whose title was what and what was new and what was old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't have a complete understanding of how the date system works.
Well, it doesn't.
Yeah.
None of us do.
Me either.
I just
I
started.
broke the whole site with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
just started
why
adding manually. Yeah.
there's certain current play completed and future ideas like the game, like for some reason those keep getting updated like every day.
Like the dates
they're
on
at the
them.
top and I'm like, why? Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, it has something to do with it sniffs based on the last publish or whatever. So like anything that doesn't have like an explicit date, it's just going to move it to the top of the queue as a new post or whatever, I think. So I just started hard coding them, but even then, like there's some UTC date format that's weird. So it's just, and like, I don't know how it got the way it was in the first place. So I'm just patching it as we go, figuring that we'll fix all that with one standard way of doing the thing. So, but yeah, I think initially the way it was set up is that it sets the date based on the like file name, and then pushes that through. But then I wasn't naming anything properly. So yeah, this is where we're at with things.
Just went to like 12.md and that probably tore the date context out of 11t. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and also this is indicative of my brain. Like sometimes I get OCD with everything and I have to put it in every right place. But this one I was just like moving through the posts that I'm sort of making in like I already have like a habituation cycle or whatever, and that stuff is, I need to like take this stuff and actually put it through a filter where it's legible. But for right now, I'm like, all right, well, what's this like? Just getting it into system. What does it feel like? What does it feel like sharing this stuff? And so I'm mostly just moving things from a pipeline that I already have into like an MD file rather than writing it directly or anything. So like moving from Bear into VS Code. And so, yeah, the like numbering and the dating had like very little to do with each other. Like other than, so it's another thing to figure out. Yeah, I assume at some point you just collapse that entire flow and then the dates are directly correlated with posting the thing rather than doing copying and pasting from place to place. But yeah, anyhow, treasure hunt.
Besides,
that's
like
what it felt like sometimes.
Or go ahead.
No, yeah, that's what it felt like. I'd like click back into a post. There's like more, and I'm like, ooh, like there's more content. Yeah, you never know.
Besides like the stuff that was on paper or like photographed, like where were you guys writing primarily?
Rome for me.
Yeah,
Rome and I writer. Yep.
Yeah, I'm in Bear, and then yeah, like doodling whatever in Concepts Pro, that like vector app on iPad, and then a bunch of stuff on this big notepad I have that I took a picture, at least one of those pages. But yeah, so I have that. I have like a morning like journaling practice, like free writing thing, where this stuff is sort of popping up, and then all that's bare for right now, with no links or tags or anything. It's just raw. So yeah,
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think for me it's mostly, it actually is mostly paper, and then I'm like, oh shoot, I'm writing on paper. This is not helpful. So then I go, it's either paper or an iPad, and then I'm like, okay, time to write this on my computer. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I start writing in the code editor for some reason. Like I'll like start something in code editor or in Rome, and then I find myself like going between, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like just pick one, but it's usually one or the other.
But that's the one thing I've noticed for me, is that I'd like start my posts either in Rome or iWriter or in Telegram, right? And then each time I move this idea from one like medium to another, it also changes how I think about it. And so I had like some resistance to moving it into VS Code, which is kind of the final step, because once it's in there, it's like pretty, relatable and shareable. But the original medium that I kind of played with it in, it kind of got torn out of that. And so that's something where it's like, I almost wish that VS Code built that layer, just like sucked it from wherever I wanted to like produce it. And so I didn't have to have that like little
That
bridge.
would be nice. Yeah.
And that way I think making subsequent changes to it becomes lower friction as well, because it's like less of a
back and forth.
Command C, Command V.
Yep.
Yeah, Shahruz, were you writing everything in VS Code? Yeah.
And I checked
it
in
works
very
fine.
late because I was also all over the place. There was no like post that I finished until they were all kind of done. So that's why I was like so late on getting my first push in too.
Fine.
It was
Everything made sense.
We were talking about, we were like, is
Did he
Shahruz
bail?
gonna post? Did he bail? I was like, maybe he's busy. And then I was like, so my sense is like something came up, or he's gonna post everything at once. I was like, he seems like the kind of person that would do everything at once. So yeah, last night John's like, did you see what Shahruz posted? And Dave and I were like, no, what? It was like 11 o'clock at night, and we were just like, what?
I had a small moment for sure.
It was like a present. We were like, wait, this is insane. Yeah, this is great.
It's definitely
gorgeous.
feeling bad about
it's
it's
cool.
like it was helpful to see everybody else's like stuff in progress and the development of it and kind of like the rawness of it. But I don't know. I also kept just being like, oh, I'll do this one little bit and finish that up, and then I'll push, and then that's kept,
But I think good.
Part of what's cool is that everyone has a different approach. I posted 3 posts today. Which one? What's missing from Buzzard Game04, my 9th post. Like, it's cool to watch how different it is. I think it's in this one. Because it feels like a real like hyper object, hyper media, because everyone's like kind of interpreting what the game is differently, and then that influences what they're creating, but it's all okay, which makes it like there's like this like level of that making it more fun, because it's just like it doesn't matter, it can be whatever it wants to be. And not knowing what it's going to be ahead of time is cool.
I definitely felt this like transition roughly, I think, around my 2nd post. I also kind of like sent it out there. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And then like seeing the next couple of posts come in from Dave, CJ, Kristen, like all of them were just in like completely different universes to mine. And I'm just like, so this is working as basically as intended. Everybody's like coming at it from different angles, but we're still like relating like the posts to one another. They're still in the same space somehow. And so the question now becomes, how do you draw those little parallels and those little associations to make it more clear, like which angle you want to look at it from, you know, what were the little like chains of reasoning, chains of thought that like influenced posts, because there's like all these soft influences throughout all the posts, and how do you kind of like pull them back out and sort of rearrange everything?
Yeah, that's the question now. Which is also like kind of where I didn't budget enough time to read everybody's stuff. Like I've been kind of like looking through, but I want to go through now, and like the researcher, like analyst in me, like wants to start like weaving together like thematic like elements, and I'm probably going to do that just because I think it'd be interesting to see what emerges. But yeah, it's all of it's manual at this point, so which is fine. We're like feeling into like the pain of that. So I'm more curious than anything, like where does this go, what do you do with it? And I don't know if there's an answer right now, but
yeah, Kristen, I feel kind of the same way. I was like eating lunch and I was just going through all of the posts. I had like 40 tabs open and just like closing the windows like as I'm going, like, okay, hopefully I'm getting this, but I do want to like more deeply dive into everything. I don't know if that's like another like session that we can have at some point, like pretty soon, because I'd be down, even if it's like doing individually and then like kind of syncing back up to do like a dive, and like finding relationships between them. I'd be super interested in that. Actually, I think that kind of touches on one of the things that I was thinking is like, I was like, this is very interesting, but the whole time it was almost radio silence between us for the most part, in the sense like there's a little bit of communication, but not a ton. And I was like, it would be really nice to be getting like feedback in a certain way, like some certain kind of synchronous feedback. Like text for me personally does not work very well. So I was just like, I just need to like bounce an idea off of someone. And I think like being like a more like collaborative process even in this would be interesting, is just like I don't know exactly how to describe, but like that extra level of collaboration. So like being able to like read individually and then sync back up, like and maybe it's with even not all 5 people, because that can be hard to sync everyone, but coming with smaller groups here and there to like sync that and like come back out with something I don't know, feels very useful and interesting.
Definitely agreed. We kind of offline got into the habit of sometimes co-creating in the same space, but we didn't talk a lot during it. It was like mainly like all of us just sharing space and like still being like pretty solo. But one thing that could be interesting on top of there is like maybe a makespace instance where we all also log on to there and like extend that virtually as well, to where again it's not that it becomes like a focal point, but kind of a way of sharing a digital space, whether people are online or offline, regardless. And I think there you can kind of like maybe spawn, like you drop a little link into Makespace and almost like propose, you know, like a little discussion about it or a little something, and whoever's there, whoever's available can kind of like also zoom into that. That's because I've like definitely feel the desire for something quite similar. Like I have this, what do you think of this? And like get back and like, let me put that back into what I'm creating.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a hackathon a little bit. Like we had a little bit of this with Interhacked, where people were just sharing space, and like some people wanted to talk and other people didn't, but like some people just listen as they were making, which is kind of cool. So you're synchronous and you get to choose sort of how much to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting, so the time frame and it being like a boxed thing versus it being like something that we're doing as a practice, like as a space to continuously like sort of dump your thinking, right? Like rather than you know, hitting some mark or whatever, because then you get the sort of feed aspect of like asynchronously keeping up with somebody, like everybody else's thinking. I like to consume information this way, you know, over time, to see people's thoughts develop or whatever. you know, clearly if somebody is like publishing and they're trying to do the, you know, like writing it in a sort of more formalized form, like in a newsletter or something like that, that's one way of going about it. But this is more of like a semi-formal, like, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing, but here's some stuff, you know, on a somewhat frequent basis, like, and then the act then is like sort of reflecting back to each other what we're hearing in each other's thought, you know. But I don't know like what the embedded
Cadence.
environment, you know, we're talking about like how you digest this stuff, how you consume it, like through what interface, you know, and that's obviously going to be different based on how you like to take in content. But there's some, so this time around though, you know, we get it all out, then there's this big pile, and then, you know, obviously the next round of this seems to be we're headed in the direction of doing some level of analysis, and maybe there's some like there's more of the standard that we were talking about, like, you know, some posting thing or whatever that sits in the midst of all of the content, and so maybe that's, rather than the specific like nature of the content, what's in it, like what's connecting it is more important or something. But yeah, so yeah, I'm feeling into how much of like the type of the content and the structure of how we're interacting with it versus what the actual content is. Yep. And they're fractal because we're doing a lot of talking about what we're building. I don't know what I'm saying right now. This is just sort of what's popping up. So yeah, anyhow, I don't know if that's anything.
Well, I definitely feel, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, so round one is create the content. Round two feels kind of like sort the content. Not even sort, but like arrange it, connect it, arrange it, make sense of it, like squeeze it, just like get a better sense of what these all like elements, how they mix, put them next to each other, shuffle them, and you know, I almost kind of feel like everybody's going to have their own views on everybody else's content as well. So we're going to sort of have like maybe 5 perspectives on how to consume this content, like how like, because I almost started doing that for my 9th post, and then I realized, oh, this is like quite a task, and so I like just narrowed it to my own posts. But then like once I'm starting to kind of arrange my posts visually, I can't help but want to pull in everybody else as well, because like I can see where those influences happened, and there's like a light timeline. But then I'm like, but this is a timeline. Like, what if I want to look at them not as a timeline? And so I'm very excited to sort of just get all this data in some sort of raw format and really like try and grok it and visualize it in different ways.
Okay.
I was going to say the one thing that Dave had said that I think I like, or if I understood it correctly, is a little bit more of a constraint on the format. So we're not questioning what we're doing in this game, but kind of have a clear idea of like, here's how we're going to deliver this thing that we're all trying to do. And I think that like kind of existential thing was fun for this game, but like, I'm kind of scared to get back into again.
Oh yeah, it was.
Like the boundary constraint that we put on this one was like potentially, if you don't have a group that's like jiving with each other, would be a pretty stressful experience. And depending on your personality, like, you know, I'm fine with this kind of thing. I'll just, if you give me 10 slots of something, I'll barf it up, you know, because the stakes are low or whatever. But they're not, though. There is also like, you know, the feeling of that uncertainty where you're just like, I don't know if this is what we're supposed to be doing here. So like, pulling in the constraints to something that is like still challenging, but like clearer within a form. I think we get probably more pointed or potent content this way. It'll be fun to play with that. Like, I don't know what lines we standardize along, right? Like, is it media? Is it, you know, delivery system? Is it ingestion? Is it, you know, whatever? But yeah, I mean, you can feel something forming there. Like, Because then if there is some area that we're narrowing down into, like there's a certain type of post or whatever, and then we can sort of start filling in the types of metadata that like might make most sense to standardize around, and then the output becomes like a template or something like that for future versions of that kind of post or something. That makes sense. Yep.
The metadata question to me is, I found it interesting, like seeing, I think maybe John had the first, or maybe Kristen, and both had metadata. And I was like, oh, these are structured differently, but they're kind of still representing the same thing. And then I'm doing my own, and I'm like, oh man, like this is great, but everyone is saying the same things in slightly different ways. And it's like, oh, if we had some kind of format here, it would be so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know at least. I mean, so I guess this is where the analysis of the, like finding the commonalities and that stuff, and then like working nomenclature on that would be fun, because then we can start to narrow down, like, I don't know, basic naming conventions or metaphors or something like this, and see if anything like sort of naturally emerges from that, which may give us like, usually if you get one of those, then you start to develop a vocabulary, and then the other things start filling themselves in, because you're like, we're using this kind of metaphor. Yeah, I've never done too much like open standard stuff like this. Mostly just closed environment stuff where we have like a team that agrees on the nomenclature because they don't get a choice. But so it'll be interesting, like proposing naming and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like one interesting view would be just what are all the metadata fields that were produced, and like literally put them in a giant spreadsheet. I don't even know if that's the right place, but like try to put them into some sort of categories, and but then what is metadata? Is a key value? Is it like all of the information that's on the file but not in the file? Like even defining this class of information is a little tricky.
It's interesting. What if you did a thing where each person had to analyze another person's metadata, and then that like put together, so John did these things, this is what I think they like represented, and then John could go back and be like, not quite, like that's not exactly what I was intending, but there could be something there to sort of work with what you're seeing in other people's work without having to go through all of them.
Yeah,
so you can be a little more focused that way.
Yeah,
I like that.
Because that makes sense though, looking like all the fields that you used, how you approached like someone else, how they approached it.
Like a second order analysis.
Yep. And then bringing that together, because that would be more constrained than if everyone did this for everybody, because we'd end up with
50 or was like 25 different more things that we then need to recategorize it. It's just like,
I mean, I do like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's an added benefit to constraining in that way too, because it almost creates that shared language. And if you can kind of, it's like the metadata itself is probably not a lot of language itself, but once another person goes and like tries to analyze it, it adds a language to it, and then now you mutually agree on, oh, that is the shared language that this metadata is representing.
Yeah, it's like it's coordinating towards some emergent consensus on languaging, like through iteration, like sort of just by bashing things together and seeing what survives.
Languaging and structure too, like not content but structure.
Tied together. The grammar of the system like produces how the system operates, like how you're sort of determining these things, and part of it is that like it ties into a little bit of what Shahruz is writing about, or a lot of it, like how the structure of the information is sort of distributed through the system, like, you know, how like IPFS works. There's like a natural grain to these things, which means that like the data being structured in certain types of ways, like I generally understood what you were doing with the JSON files and, you know, this kind of thing. And then like where the metadata is stored, how it's updated, all of these kinds of things, whether it's off chain, on chain. These kinds of mental models, I think, can start to play in the way that it's organized. And if that stuff is organized in tune with like the sort of decentralized ethos, I think that you'll probably feel an elegance in it. So that's just a takeaway and like what I'm feeling into in the sort of bigger project space, I guess. It's so I have no idea what I'm saying right now.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
Does someone can someone repeat what Dave said, or
yeah, if that makes
sometimes
sense.
I ask Dave to repeat what he said, and he's like, I don't know what I just said.
I feel like oh yeah, take a stab at it, John.
Okay, I mean, there's like IPFS has its own like grammar about how it wants its data structured. Even though it's any data can go into it, like by nature of putting data on IPFS, you're going to split up and organize and annotate information a little differently than if you were uploading it to a giant S3 bucket or uploading it onto like an external hard drive. So if we kind of that's IPFS, whatever we're trying to organize our information, though it may layer on IPFS later, like are there rules and feelings and like weird senses to how our own information tries or wants to be organized? It's like it almost like tries to be next to each other or within each other, and how like with relative to a blockchain, like are there constraints on where you store things, which things point to which, and which are permanent and which are like a little less and more like transactional.
There's a bit of a sliding scale too in terms of like pure decentralization, meaning absolutely no, servers that we run that runs a little bit of like glue code or something that's needed. So yeah, I think in what I was writing, I was kind of taking a purist approach of like, all right, how do you validate that nobody's messed up somebody else's comment if they're replying to a comment and make that secure? Like if that was going through even a single kind of API jump, that could be done easily. So yeah, I don't know. I think I was going for one kind of side of the spectrum there in terms of like pure decentralization, but those problems can be avoided or they can be kind of iterated out over time. Yep.
So Shahruz, you're kind of saying like like I guess it is very possible to go the full decentralization approach. It's just potentially the amount of work to get there is also a little bit higher than like iterating towards and say having that one API gateway or jump in between.
I think maybe the amount of work isn't the measure. I think it's a level of security and like knowing that something's going to work the way that you expect it to, because with all these new systems, there's all these new quirks to them. And sometimes you just got to work against them. I don't think it's necessarily more difficult. It's just different. Learning those systems.
Okay, so there's a bit of that's going on here, like figuring out like the best sort of experimentation that we can do to get a better feel for the like sort of frictions in building in this like world. Yeah, like because we won't know until we hit this stuff together. Like, and Shahruz, you're out ahead a bit because you've been playing. And so, yeah, it's for me, it's still all very theoretical, and I can feel like how you kind of could do it in an aspirational sense, but what that looks like on the actual ground when you start sticking stuff together and tying things up and launching things that other people are going to use. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
I tried to make that solidity tutorial thing like as like but I'm also not experienced, so I might have totally bombed on that, but try to make it easy to get into.
At least for me, I thought it was great. I was like, I was actually freaking out this morning. I was like, holy shit, this is too good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I
too
was
good.
able to follow it easily.
That
And
could be standalone content
Yeah.
in and of its own. I'm just like that,
Easily.
you should like republish that somewhere or publish it from that link. I'm just like that. I think that it presented the information perfectly, but also the information that it presented was like very, very relevant, like extremely relevant. So
yeah,
props.
Yeah, I think looking through your existing code for like the bank and stuff, like I kind of had an idea of like variables, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like embedded C. Like I kind of have done this before. And then when there's like the kind of like the key value store, I was like, oh wow, this is way powerful. Like I was like, totally makes sense that there's a map like involved. But then I was like, oh, this just got way more powerful than I initially imagined.
Can you
rather
explain
than just integers?
The mapping stuff? I kind of vaguely get it, but not really.
What's like the language that you're most comfortable with?
CSS.
That's a tricky one.
JavaScript probably.
Okay. So in JavaScript, you can define something that's like a variable equals and then like 2 curly braces, and it's an object. And then that object, you can do like object dot first or something, I don't know, equals, and then a value. So that's a key value store. Solidity mapping is exactly the same thing. Literally no difference, except that for any key that you provide it, it's going to have a default value that it gives you back that's just the empty kind of version of that value. So there's no like null, there's no undefined. It's going to be like a 0 or an empty string or something along those lines.
Okay.
But I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I was able to follow the feel of the logic, but syntax and stuff, it's hard to compare if I don't know a bunch of other languages, but yeah, cool. So the power that you're talking about, CJ, like what were you feeling into there? Like what was like contextually, like what did it open up for you in an understanding, I guess?
I guess for me, like I get thinking about Ethereum and knowing that it is, I think is it Turing complete Solidity?
I don't know. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I
don't get as deep into the computer science, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah. No, like I was just imagining like, I kind of had the idea that this was the case, but also taking a distributed systems class in college, thinking about like we spent the first 5 weeks of that class building a distributed key value store and reading a bunch of distributed key value store papers, and this kind of that mapping itself is like you have a key, you say, I don't know, maybe you say the key is apple and the value is banana. Why not? And every time you put an apple, you're going to get banana. And having that like level of distributed key value store that's on a blockchain, globally accessible and kind of validated by everyone, it just added a certain like level of like there's a certain power in that, in the sense like I could theoretically like build a bigger database on top of that is not hosted on S3 or not hosted on AWS. It's not hosted on my traditional web server, and it's just remapping like how I would think about this information. And I think Shahruz also touches on this a little bit in terms of like how defined your like API backend is once you write it into the contract, it's this like more solid thing, and now your front end conforms to that. I think those two things like really just it hit me a little bit different than I'd watched the video previously of Shahruz like demoing the apps, the conversations that we've had previously. It just hit me again that like, oh wow, like stuff in this space is like very possible and a little bit more tangible than I first saw, because I hadn't like looked directly into Solidity programming in particular, and looking through the previous code and looking through his explanation now of kind of building up to the point of where you get a key value, it did have this like power to it that I was just like, this is really interesting and we can build things with this. And like I could build like lots of random things, I think.
It feels like it's like within arm's reach. It's like it's coming down a little more from the abstract vague, opaque, like amorphous thing into, oh, okay, I'm like starting to see how these little bits and pieces plug and then stack and then multiply. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's getting me very excited, to say the least.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to track this. Like I have, since I'm less familiar with the computer science of this stuff and the syntax, like I can feel that there is a shift in the way you can do things. But like it helps to hear you guys talk it out. And then obviously when you're publishing things, like I can feel a snap coming at some point. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how, what to do with it. Like design wise, I guess. Yeah.
I think an element for what CJ was saying about mapping, because I think I had the same kind of like trigger moment when I came across it the first time. Knowing also that Solidity it's like a modern language for a modern OS that is taking in all the learnings of how internet services and apps and products have been built over the past 20 plus years. So knowing that the code, the programming language itself has like native understanding of what an address is, meaning it has a built-in type for a user account, which like, if you write something in C++ or JavaScript or Python or anything, you have to like figure out what account system you're going to use. You have to figure out where to host it. So Solidity just is like built in. This is how users work across everything. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Contracts is just like it's default. It's built in. Same thing with payments. So like payments are also just like a native thing. You don't have to plug into a Stripe-like kind of API. It's just built in.
As beautiful as Stripe's API is becoming, it doesn't compare to native low-level, like, this is the suit, like this is the same substrate that you are working in. It's like there's a beautiful consistency there.
Got it. So yeah, like we used to have to build an entire billing system or whatever it is, and like sort of abstract. I got it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I kind of felt into that where it's like you've got the wallet address or whatever, or the address in the data, so it knows what the hell's going on. Okay. It's slowly getting there.
And is that because the native aspect of address, because it's decentralized, you need to be able to find other people or other locations?
I think it was just a design decision that was factoring in a lot of things of how do you, I think maybe starting with the problem of how do you get everybody an account on a decentralized system where you don't need, one kind of root database. And the answer turned out in their case to be, very difficult to reverse engineer private keys to public address and like just having that be a simple relationship. So I think the address format came about through that just because it solved that problem. And then when figuring out what to put into the language, it was just like, yes, let's use the addresses. We don't need to figure out usernames or other kind of things. Those can be built on top of addresses, which are our core kind of unit here. But just like, I don't think a programming language, or at least not a popular one before Solidity that I've seen, has a native concept of a user. It's just like not what programming languages are thinking about really.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird to say because
everything
you make should have a user.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I would love to know where that is coming from, like philosophically. I'll have to research more, but yeah.
I think, oh man. It seems to me like we have Apple Pay and all these things. Like, honestly, one of the simplest problems on the internet that I like still to this day just like don't understand is why I have to create so many goddamn user accounts. And like, it's funny that this like little tiny Ethereum address like actually solves that in a way. And maybe that's part of what hit me too is, oh, I really don't have to worry about this anymore. Like, it's part of it is building the right abstractions on top of that address to make it easy for anyone. And MetaMask does it to some degree, but it seems like there's a little bit more work to be there and to be done there. And I like that would just be convenient more than anything. And like, I don't know, it's funny, like convenient things end up like usually working out pretty well.
Yeah. That's the first
it's
feeling of the sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, I feel like the tech underneath is so like stable and just feels so obvious. Like once it starts clicking of like, oh, this is clearly a better direction. I would bet based on nothing but just like how good the tech is, that like Apple's native wallet app that they have that's like currently, you know, for QR codes or boarding passes or credit cards and stuff, like they'll probably have Ethereum functionality within that if it takes off within like a few years. And it just starts feeling more like a native kind of thing to those platforms.
Yeah, then that pattern where the wallets are the initial pattern here, where, you know, you build whatever UI like flow and formatting or whatever that makes sense for the particular audience you have, and it's you know, the same thing as podcast apps and all this other stuff. Yeah, then the range of power within that, I guess, like, and designing in this way. Yeah, I just have to change my brain around this a little bit. Like, okay. Yeah, it's so much thinner, that layer, if you can not have to worry about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Thinner, but also more consistent, like across the entire planet, across, you know, industries and languages spoken. And so I think it's like there's going to be a little more mobility between services because everybody has this lower level so consistent that it, you know, like the friction and the cost to switching between things will be lower. Also, like interesting ramifications with competition and like what group efforts can do. But on the whole, like right now, Google locks you in. That little Google OAuth flow is powering half the internet, and it's abysmal. It's a piece of trash, but like, so that's the current, you know, offering.
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of fundamental questions that start to come up with that like account, you know, is if you do have, at what point is it identity? I mean, it is like being treated as identity effectively. Do you have multiple identities? I mean, certainly it's quite possible. But do you also have like one primary identity where, you know, you could have like pseudonyms that are, you know, maybe not linked to you directly at all, but you could also have pseudonyms that are, or, you know, I don't know. I think it starts opening up a lot of questions and like data ownership and like, it starts to become like a pretty big question, and how governance plays in a decentralized fashion versus, you know, I think to some degree we're seeing something similar in China where they do have a digital identity system, but it is more under central authority. So those seem like they're in tension with each other, as well as, you know, like you're looking back at like dystopian futures, like, okay, well, how do you not play into that too hard too? I don't know. It's like those things all start to like spin up in my head, at least.
Yeah, I think this is why you play with these things in little games first. To see, to see like how dystopian your little game becomes, you know, with like people trying to stress test it and, you know, exploit it.
Contain the damage. Put some blast shields up.
And then if the patterns develop that are fun, that like can be turned into something that like manage higher stakes, it's a good way to like build on it, because it's, you know, so I mean, I think that's part of the fun in designing like some of the more global gaming stuff or whatever. Like, all right, we're trying to create a little bubble in this season, and here are the general rules for it. Here are some governance like stuff, and then see if you guys create a dystopian hellscape or not. But the thing that's popping up now is that like this standard, you know, being a sort of generalized standard for content, or however the hell this thing is gonna, and then like being able to design that layer on top of it. There's just one sort of implementation of the thing. Like, you know, like I would probably work in the web because I like that, or maybe, you know, an iOS thing or something like that. But clearly there are so many different ways that you can like digest or consume or whatever. Because yeah, if we have something that looks like a bunch of primitives, and then it goes back to the block stuff that the subtext thing was, where like all these sort of concepts are starting to float around, and then yeah, they're getting close to sticking together here. Yeah.
Something I couldn't totally understand about the subtext thing is how in the post he said that it's not markdown, but it looks very much like markdown, and I don't totally understand.
Yeah,
the
I think it's
distinction. I
like
can see
markdown,
it
but he didn't even include bolding or italics. So it's like
okay,
markdown
so
in the sense that it's fixed with and, you know, like in a file, but I think beyond that, you have the hyperlinks look the same, a couple other things, and that's it. Like he basically did not import the rest of markdown into it.
I see. Cool.
Yeah, I think Dave and CJ, like you kind of brought up this feeling that this sort of relationship I'm feeling between content and identity, which really are like two sides of the same coin, because what you produce is under your name, but what gives meaning to your name is what you produce. And so the idea of multiple identities, like, well, John Doe posted 10 posts, but I might have another identity that only posted 2 of those. And they're like, if they're not connected to the other 10, then only the person that has like access to my identity that is tied to all 10 can like make sense of that whole picture, but I could still maybe share bits and pieces of it out that don't have as much like context about the rest of me. And so kind of become a different identity, but more like within something. It's like nestled into something.
Yeah, this is where I'd want to design like a playing field where like playing with multiple identities and stakes surrounding those things would be like how to push into seeing what people would want to do. Yeah, because that one's hard for me to like think about the cases from just zero. I mean, you have like obviously the heady cases about social media and, you know, or like, you know, dissidents and like needing to use Signal and all this other stuff, but that stuff's it's too heavy.
It's on the edges,
like,
right? It's like the very,
you know, this is there's got to be some game mechanic that's like, you know, I don't know. It's some publishing thing that's like, you know, you need to get out some piece of vulnerable information or whatever it is, and like, how do you design an identity to do this in an identity system? Like, what are the actual like use cases for that? Yeah.
One other thing I'm kind of getting there is like, again, this would have to be done in a reasonably high trust environment, but like rewards for uncovering other people's identities, which acts as a forcing function to like obfuscate your own content to a higher degree. And again, there could be like a little pool that, you know, everybody like chips into, but this idea of trying to force like this filter for other people through like this like social backwards like irreversibility, it seems really interesting to me.
Yeah,
it's almost like can I write something that almost looks like CJ's output in order for somebody else to not guess that is my output.
So it's a camouflage game.
Yeah, like, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Or something like camouflage or misdirection.
Some sort of chameleon-y, like acting, like persona switching thing. Yeah.
That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you just go look at evolution and biology, and I'm sure there are tons of like stratagems there. But yeah, info warfare game. Yeah, I'm still, I don't know. Hopefully, I mean, we'll start playing with that stuff at some point. But yeah, I'm still kind of in the like the pipeline to publishing these kinds of things, or if that's even a way of thinking about this at all, like publishing being a model. Yeah, I don't know. More questions than answers right now.
Can you just speak more about like the pipelining stuff? Because I'm thinking like, from my perspective, is like, I have like few ways that I can a few ways that I can now get information in. It's now like the organization of the information is just like blown up, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, like your own personal like organizational system, or the just the communal pile, like which
all of the above. Because even now I'm posting in like mainly 3 different folders, or like even for this game, I posted like in buzzard.4 under my name like this.
Yeah.
Now I created a bot that like consumption and everything goes there. And and that's like even ideas, anything just on the fly. And then I also am like kind of keeping like a daily log kind of thing as well. And I'm just like losing it, and I'm trying to like link between them, because like the daily log really should be encapsulating like the things that I'm like writing and doing that day, and like that metadata should be associated with it. And I'm just like, oh no, I can't do this. And then I'm looking at everyone else's, and I'm like, everyone else has structure to some degree. And I'm like, I still don't know how to follow this structure either.
Yeah, that's the thing though. Like I think you're able to push past this friction that I feel very hard. Like I also want a daily notes section and like an amorphous clump of notes and more like directed content. You know, when we have like this game, that's sort of where my attention is going. But there's like little side channels of information that I'm producing too. And for me, like I essentially you're putting them somewhere. I'm just like throwing them out. But I also like definitely feel that desire to where it's like it's not all meant to go into the same place, but there are very strong associations, and mostly it just depends on like from which angle I want to look at it. Like in my personal little timeline, you see where I like interacted with the game, but from the game you see the context about what else I was doing in the daily notes file. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's like a thing here with posting versus file system, because we've talked about like if it's just your personal file system, and then consumption of content and who can see what. And so like something that's coming up is sort of like relational metadata, where there's trust layers where you can sort of tag your content like with like people who have like this level of clearance can see this post. And then there's some kind of like active, like, this is because I'm not technical, I don't know how to explain this in terms of how this would actually work, but this is the game stuff where there's something encoded in my relationship to each of you in the system, where certain people, like Dave, would probably have the most access. And I don't know how that would evolve, but yeah, it's like a game, like there's levels almost, but it's relationship levels. And you don't know like, how do you play that game though? That's interesting.
So there's, I mean, that one, I think, so we can just talk about it in terms of primitives. This has popped up a bunch of different times, the like sort of circle of trust concept. The thing that's popping up now is it being tied to blocks. So one of the simplest version I could think of, like, so I've got my free writing journal. It's just like, you know, an open markdown file. I'm putting all kinds of stuff in there. Some of it is like pretty personal, like, you know, diet stuff and whatever else like this, or like interpersonal relation stuff that I'm working on, or, you know, therapy kinds of things. And I'm not really interested in sharing that because, you know, I don't see the upside, or it's noise, in my opinion. That's debatable. It doesn't matter. But there is probably some circle of people that might be interested in doing this. And the way it's structured is blocks, because I'm just writing out stuff or whatever. So at a per block level, you could do a like, this is this circle of trust level, this, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 moving out, and, you know, broader circles you know, are moving toward like a higher number is a broader audience kind of thing, right? So the inadvertent like small management of trust on a block level could produce like circles of content that of access to content, right?
Yeah,
the equivalent of like
you could do this like you do again, I don't have the language. You know how like the simple like markdown where you have different formatting for like headers and you have to end it, like you have to close it. So you could have like certain, like just the language is built in where this is private from here to here, and then it's, and you can
like
include
sections of a
HTML
page
tag.
kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead
It'd
of
be
doing
tagged.
it block by block, because like part of me is like, well, that's annoying if you have to like say which block is which. But yeah, I'm just operationalizing it into my head in a way that could be more fluid.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And I
what
also
you're saying, Dave.
kind of see, like, you know, if you define this block and you give it some certain metadata, it's almost presumable that that metadata should apply not to children blocks, but to blocks created like at the same level as those until you change, you know, and then you say, actually, this is now like a different level. And then that would, you know, maybe apply going forward. So I definitely kind of see like you treat it more like a stream and like modes of creation that you sort of spin rather than annotating every single piece of information.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, overhead on that. I mean, there might be, this is back to the like pre-publishing model of this. There's an interface where you're developing a lot of stuff with other people. It's off-chain effectively in a trusted environment, and you're rejiggering stuff and moving it into buckets, however you're doing it. Like personally, this is where like the end result being like a Figma style like canvas, where I'm able to like the text input is as fluid as something like Bear or something like that, but then there's a graphical user interface that allows you to tie and portal and like move through like sort of different perspectives. I mean, that is that's so many iterations away, but like I'm trying to pull back into how is the manual version of this, because you know I can see, I still don't understand how the like folding process, the sort of development process of closer to like more coherent thought, right? Like, and a lot of that is like, who are you writing to? Who are you writing from, and in what persona, right? So like, this is where sort of containing these games to start to get a feel for the field of play and who you are, the agent in that arena, like can start to define these things a little bit better. This is like what Shahruz is talking about, like constraining that thing into like, okay, so I'm this person in relationship to this. There is to this game, you know, there's maybe like a two-step process where we publish to an inner circle, and then there's another move that goes out publicly. And like, what is the coordination to clarify that? Are we publishing as one voice, or is it like individuals within that? You know, anyway, so this is more of the pipeline stuff, CJ, that I was thinking about. And then the actual specific, like, because this is, if we can nail down form somewhere in here, like some consistent style of form, like, you know, you have the blog post as a form that can be ingested and consumed, and you know, all of these things with a standard. You know, what is the like decentralized publishing like form that is native to the environment that has these like sort of relational features that we're talking about. That's, I think, where we're headed. We're trying to find this thing so that like there is some standardized but still bespoke. That's the thing with this. Like it you know, it doesn't need to be all of the corners are chopped off, but yeah, I don't know. I don't understand enough of how these things emerge, like, and it's some networked kind of content thing, though.
There's a bit of a puzzle with, hope I'm not getting too technical, but like with, if you're going to have decentralized publishing, but you want control over access, how do you do that when the data is public, when it has to be kind of, you know, put up somewhere? Okay. And that, I think there's an interesting way to combine that with this concept of like multiple accounts, multiple identities. And maybe that's an abstraction for the leveling of like, if every Ethereum address is like entirely random and you can just generate as many as you want, then maybe it's about you forking kind of like, you know, a new address, a new identity for that specific level. And the only way it's going to get associated back to you is when you have given that address out or link to it, or, you know, otherwise there's absolutely no way to tie that back to you. It's just content that's out in the open. I don't know. There's something interesting there about solving that puzzle of like, how do you make something private in an inherently public space? And then how do you factor in multiple accounts and identities and level off kind of access levels? And I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of analogy I've seen on Reddit where I kind of wish I could just make every post default anonymous, but just selectively go back and tie various comments to various like accounts or identities. And because the more information you publish as one identity, like the easier it becomes to like understand it, but at the same time, produces a lot of noise. So only showing somebody like a certain window is a way of like clarifying as much as it is obfuscating. It like focuses them only to what you want tied to that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some component here that like having this stuff tied to an identity, there's some maturation of identities that allow you to do stuff in systems, right? Like in the case of Reddit, obviously karma points or something like this, right? That I don't know how all that ties in yet, but you're going to want to maintain some relationships between these things because there's value
benefits
in there.
To the longevity, and you want to probably incentivize like stable identities over like jarring like jumping ones. And so like is there like kind of almost like a one-way hash function you could apply it to somebody's score, so you don't maybe know the overall like or the exact, but you know the magnitude or the weight relative to the other nodes.
Don't know on this one. This one will emerge.
Tricky one.
Yeah. I mean, for now, like the tiered stuff is going to be interesting. Like, I mean, we'll just continue to, I guess we'll just do some experiments on that and see what it's like tying. Anyways, yeah. So get lost in that.
Because I was like, I'm getting lost. I was like, I'm going down something right now. Okay. But Dave, coming back to something that you said earlier is, I think you mentioned like, what are the forms?
Yeah.
And like, would it be useful for us to like literally just go through again, like on the content we produced, go through the forms that we have already produced and see like in what ways can this be more solidified or concretized in some way, especially regarding like the relationships between things, and like where do those relationships fall, and is there, because to me like what you're describing with the whole Figma file canvas thing, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's what makes sense in my head too. Like I want that too, is like multiple things go into that and then I look at this thing and like now I can do things. But can that be done at a file level? Like can we do that in a more raw way before getting to that like higher level abstraction?
I think so too. And like part of the thing I'm thinking about there is that like, all right, so Figma is so here's the relationship in like the current publishing, like books are really easy because they've been around for a long time. You have like pre-press, you have people, you have how the information is developed in whatever system that's going to, note-taking or, sketching or whatever the hell that is. And then it moves into some like medium that is, editable and iterable, right? And then once it has gone through editing and synthesis and organization and all this stuff, it is then going to move into a form that gets encoded right into a book, right? And that book is a standard format with, it has it is referenceable by some library format or whatever. It can, join the larger world of knowledge, and then it's got record locators, and then you have other people who reference it and whatever. It creates a sort of web. It's very slow motion, very suitable to the printing press time, right? And then you speed it up with like digital pre-press and all that other stuff, but it's effectively maxed out on speed. And it's pretty mechanical in its nature in the way you develop these things. So, and then TV has a similar kind of thing. Radio has a similar kind of thing. Just move those forwards into podcasts and YouTube, and so now we're talking about like a digitally network native form, right? And then taking advantage of all of the sort of like, you know, the ability to have it updatable in real time and all of these other things. But then you get blockchain stuff where you could like encode this thing in the same way that you do with a book, right? Like it's on the chain. It is, you know, a stabilized version of reality in some way or whatever. I don't know if that's important or, you know, that has something to do with the form here. But there's a pre-press process that goes into creating these things. And so that's the, you know, like, and the nature of the form is going to be like suited to an internet media. And like, I'm so stuck on like, you know, web pages as the format because I've spent so much time making them. And like web pages, like a page in a book, or like, you know, what is this stuff when it is detached from display and it's just content that is related? Like how can you, you know, what is the sort of pure data relational format of this thing that has a natural expression visually or auditorily or like through video or something like this? Like this is how primordial my thinking is on this thing. But that's where I'm like coming up. Yeah, like, and this is partially like if we have these sort of primitives that we're starting to develop, maybe they're block based, maybe that's what sticks them all together, then you have enough to play with to be like, all right, well, how do we best present this? And so this is down to audience, and depending on like the sophistication of the reader, you're going to present it in different ways. You know, you have academic books that are full of footnotes and whatever else, and then you have children's books that are full of pictures and are 5 pages. So like there's a spectrum of and that stuff has to develop over time. But if you have like basic primitives to play with on this stuff, yeah, I don't know. It's the invention of our pamphlet that comes from the printing press. Like, what is the smallest, you know, deliverable of a type of information that is consumable, like through this standard in, you know, and can be displayed in some, it is a thing. There's a thingness to it.
It is a thing. Yes.
Yeah. And you're like, you could stack up a bunch of those things and then you'd have a group of them and they exhibit some like bespoke standardization. You know, it's not commodified, right? Like, but there is a, I don't know.
Well, one of the things that's challenging about this, because like there's similarities and differences to the example of like a printing press or a book, right? Yeah. So one of the big differences here is like, this is like, John, you're coming to mind with your interest in like how things evolve over time. Like this stuff is not necessarily set in stone, like it's never done. So like if things can be constantly updated, like what does that mean? Like if there's like there's a movement to it, there's a flow to it. So you want to see like, oh, that something's been updated, which is different than a book. Like you'd have to, if you need to update a book, you have to do the whole process again and you have like another release. But if in what we're talking about, I don't think that you wouldn't have, like, it's not necessary to do that. So there's no final form, I guess, is what I'm potentially like, or final content in the form. So how do you allow for that? Does that, I mean, does that make this problematic? Or, I mean, not problematic, it makes it challenging. Is that important?
I think like, to me, it's starting to sound like disassociating, like, well, maybe not disassociating, but like there's a very clear separation between data and metadata, in the sense like the book exists in multiple time periods, but it's really the metadata that's like telling you more information about that than anything else. It's like the book still exists in that form, even though it might got republished. But if you're to look at the front of the book cover, you say, oh, this was published, when, and it's like this copy of that book.
Yep.
In a similar way. Or this edition, yeah.
Yeah, and what is different about this edition? Like, how do I think about this? Like, yeah.
Two things came to mind there. One is in Shahruz's Space 10 version, the perception that I really like the no time dimension element. It just cut that right out, and everything you produce has to be self-contained, and there's no unwind button, there's no timeline, there's no feed. There's something about that feels very, very stable and easy to navigate, and especially given how you'd come back to a friend's grid and it would pretty much look exactly like it did last time. If there was a change, there's because it was a very significant reason for that change. I think it's very useful to see what that might look like completely without time. And I think what we're looking for is somewhere a little closer. And the second thing I'm thinking of is that it's just software, like over-the-air updates. They happen invisibly. Most of the time, you don't care that something changed. But on specific moments, like the app does maybe pop something up that says, hello, since the last time, here's what's actually changed. And there needs to be some discernment between the two.
The no time dimension of things is really, I think, or the distinction between time and no time is kind of fascinating.
Very.
It's hard to say. Go ahead, Shahruz.
I was just gonna say, how do you do a standard if there's such a big kind of gap between such a fundamental decision?
Yes. I wonder.
People get really into this came before that. This was a huge topic of conversation with Interhacked. People just go crazy about if you don't have a uniform time positioning of things in relation to each other, but for some reason that didn't feel right. People would get caught up in that because it was does it really matter though if and then because I don't know, I keep coming back to the context of it. It doesn't necessarily matter the order, generally speaking, broad picture, but it does matter the order in which you consume something depending on the arena in which you consume it. So I don't know, I'm thinking about looking at an avocado, so an avocado tree and how it grows, and the avocado being born versus making guacamole in food. There's just there's different ways of looking at the avocado, its life form that how you look at lineage, how you look at time depends on the context. And are you trying to eat it? Are you trying to grow it? Are you painting it? It's gonna what's contextually important, which doesn't matter. Which comes back to consumption, kind of as the person, if you're going through relational OS and what are you doing? Why are you there? What are you trying to you're looking for something because you're oh, I'm interested in the lineage of avocado farming in Mexico, and you can piece it together because a bunch of people have written little snapshots. So you have to, there's a query into that filters out the other stuff. Time doesn't matter in that sense. It's more of you just care what's related to this specific query.
I wonder if you could do generics for those, because I mean, time itself is kind of a generic dimension that you can kind of extrapolate other information out of, like the lineage of something. But you could say that the avocado's relationship to the tree is also a parent-child or child-parent structure, and you could lose the time element and still get the core of what that that relationship is, or whatever the most important thing that you would otherwise use time to kind of figure. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so like I think the things popping up here is like sort of, this is very anthropological, like the concept of like a small tribe or whatever orienting to each other before clock time, right? There are a bunch of things that are happening in relationship to environment and relationship between exchanging, trading, you know, talking, gossiping, like all of these, you know, moving, hunting, gathering, all of this stuff, right? That form a bunch of things that are, I mean, there is, I guess, there is a time component to that, but less.
But the time
structured.
is like, yeah, well, the time is, it's time for me to hunt again, which means I need to go to this place because there's people in this place that I can go band with because I don't hunt alone. So I need to go back to the place where I meet with the other people who do the hunting. Or
it's more like dependency chains and like prerequisites rather than, oh, it is 5:46 p.m. and I need to. It's more like
I need to hunt now. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and then work backwards to get where I need to go.
Yeah, I don't know if obligation has something to do with this. Not sure there.
It's like energy flows.
Is there like a glossary, or go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, is there a glossary of like primitive relation types between objects? I don't know if glossary is even the right word, but like a list of
probably.
Like, there's parent, child.
Dave was getting into this. This is like the grammar of how things relate.
Prepositions.
Prepositions, yeah.
So this is where I was fooling around, like with, next, over, between, you know, all of these kinds of things. Because I think that's the core of the metaphors that you can use for a UI, right? Which probably it works within a graph database and all this kind of stuff. Like this is how you sort of mark these up.
Yeah.
Because then one of the things that I was mapping is like, all right, so if you can plot relationships in like a sort of, I don't know, 3D, 4D environment or whatever, and then apply, you know, coordinate structures to these things, there are nearnesses values that could come from this thing, like, you know, two people posted along the same line and they are coordinated along some, I don't know how the math works here, but like that gives you some model that could, and time could be overlaid on top of that. You could scrub through these things as they're placed or whatever. But yeah, some coordinate system. Yeah, the most blunt version is XYZ that I could think of. And then like so over or under has like some meaning within this spatial environment. I don't know what that specifically maps to though. Like, and you know, then the minimum or like the most general version of like a relationship is an entanglement of some kind. That's my like general languaging, which I'm just stealing from quantum stuff that I don't really fully understand. But these two objects are entangled. They are across space-time, like related in some way. And then, okay, how do you coordinate those things more closely within, you know, a space-time field or something? It's ridiculous. So, yeah. But that gets you moving closer to a Figma style canvas where these relationships can be like printed out into pixels somehow, you know. It may be that the stratum for this thing natively is like a 3-dimensional VR place, you know, but we're too early on that. But you can translate it to 2D. It's fine.
Yeah. 2D side scrollers get the point across even without, you know, bringing you into it. Like,
yeah,
just flatten it and split it up or yeah, like because a lot of the old file systems, they had these 3D visualizations, but they never felt right because they were trying to reproduce 2D structure within 3D, and that's not useful. I mean, it's pretty, but it's not actually like doesn't help your brain understand the relation of the data. But seeing your post here and two annotations here and allowing me to take all three and somehow put them next to something, that starts to make sense, because it completely gets rid of files and folders as the, it doesn't quite get rid of them, but in that view, in that specific view, it like hides them.
Yeah, there are different primitives, and then this is the queries versus files thing here. There's another model that queries give you with this grouping of information. And as you like change your querying around, you get different perspectives, and those perspectives are savable in some way. There's a memory to them because they are changing in relationship to the ever-changing field of data. So like being able to like lock viewports effectively, and then those viewports are tied to identity somehow, right? This is back to the addresses or whatever. That viewport has address, and that address can be assigned to I don't know. This is like, yeah. And then you could, all right, I wish to see the viewport on this field of information. And then there is an interactive component to this. You can move through things, you can manipulate things. The form is inherently moldable or movable or interactive, because that's how things work now, like rather than a book, which is an imprint of somebody's thought that you can then interact with as a symbol, right? The symbol is now in the network environment able to talk back. So once you take it a couple steps further, you get machine intelligences, and one of these things can represent through voice and video or whatever, the potential thinking of the underlying thinkers who came and brought it together. And then you have like a sort of intelligent entity that you can interact with or whatever through some form. A hologram, probably, of Tupac.
Almost like,
do you have like little
hologram
vignettes in your head, Dave?
Yeah.
For this
Like,
stuff? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you describe things very visually, and then we all kind of have to make it up in our own heads.
Yeah, sorry.
And see what you're seeing. No, it's good.
Yeah. What I heard there was like books need to understand the annotations drawn on them, and that needs to like feed back into the information and like change what you're annotating out. Like currently, when you write with a pen on a piece of paper, like there's no link, but we like digital devices open up some new possibilities there.
Yeah, I probably just need to go find some storyboard artists or something, and then just who have some understanding of this and who can, or a UI will start popping out of the, it just will, I think. Like having the technical stuff that you guys are throwing back and reflecting is helping me understand what is possible in this thing. Yeah, I don't know. I just keep doing this until there's somebody who might be able to make some pictures on top of this thing. Maybe it's me. I don't know yet.
The entanglement stuff makes me think about dialectic stuff, where things like two things are coming together, and then there's an emergence. So there's a third thing like coming out, and there's lineage for how you can get from one place to another. And there's something here around like, show me all of the ways that you can get to this like specific like area, and then you've got all these different like or if I put these two things together, show me all of the possible things that can come out of it based on what other people have found so far. This is like because and different people think about different things, and then there's lineage in all of this that's unique to the query. And this is where annotating like certain, like, because you're looking at like, it feels very like 3D to me. Like this thing here speaks to me in this way, right? And then that's another dialectic. This lineage here, plus my thinking about it in this way, gives rise to this thing. And then that becomes another like query. Like this thing is just constantly like, it's like alive. Things are coming together. They're birthing out another thing, and then that can be related to. Yeah, it's weird. It feels very like it's like active. I'm like writing this. I'm like, it's weird. It's moving, it's flowing. I mean, this is where like the quantum stuff, like you're not asking it to stop moving. You're just trying to get a snapshot of it in time so that you can understand what's happening, because it's not, it doesn't stop moving. It's alive. You want to maintain the life of it because that's what makes it interesting, which is like totally different than like what you see in books and like blog posts now, where it's just like, it's not, it's too much of a snapshot and it's not related to anything. It's like an island.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the writing inside those things can come alive because it speaks to these tendrils, but you can't go follow the lineages. Like I mean, you can, it's just a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah, everything is interconnected now in the network. Like that is the native environment that we're playing in. And so part of it is like consolidating it into forms that can be cowpathed like easily, that can be consumed and digested. And then there is some metaphor here, like there's something related to the nomadic stuff. I don't know why. Marshall McLuhan talked a bunch about this, like how we are moving into a sort of, you know, the informational economy kind of thing, and we're at like a hunter-gatherer, you know, place with this stuff. There are a bunch of resource out there, and then there are these roles that are like moving through the information landscape and curating and bringing and processing, but we're all pretty primordial with this. And things are less fixed now, which means that the forms are like, you don't need like a gigantic library with physical space to store this stuff, which means that it is inherently portable, right? Which means that the style of form and the style of interaction is maybe more portable. And I don't know, again, I'm looking for any edge on this to try and see it. So
I actually wrote about this in my 8th post that I posted today. So the nomading thing is about impermanence and relationships to people and place, but it's following energetic flows. Like you're just sort of moving with what is like present, but it's always with the lens of like letting go and beginning again. So like you're getting snapshots on things, but you don't hold on to them. There's no permanence to them in a way, which there's something here that feels like I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a different style of thingness. So in the like, what is it, like the Aristotelian forms, they're very objective and defined and static.
Yes.
And so like much of our understanding of the world, the physical world, is based on these forms. Like you can objectively measure that thing out there and call it a thing. But like if you actually take a look and break it all down, there is no boundary condition between any of them. They're arbitrary and they are constantly moving and in flux. But you know, like you take a piece of glass and that thing is moving, you know, it's melting downwards in relation to gravity or whatever. It's just doing it at a rate that, you know, the human mind can't see or whatever. So like, how do you, there's a bunch of stuff happening in biology and different sciences that are starting to take into account this, like the natural movement of all things in relation to each other. And there's something to the media that is representing that forefront. But you still need to snapshot to be able to interact with the, you know, thingness of stuff. I think
handles, you know, to like hold on to, and
otherwise you're untethered completely. Yeah,
you're just tripping all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this is like Deleuze writes about this move in technology towards the enmeshed web, where you can travel between things and there's nodes. It's a web. And
so you're stabilizing perspective through query, and the query is effectively giving you like constraints or parameters on the world of data that is hopefully clean enough, because there is a standardization, right, to be able to be enmeshable, right? And the cleaner your yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so like spinning up and like building up a complex lensing system to look at data, right? And then being able to take pieces of that and move them into other systems or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna get too abstract here. We'll set it down.
All right, so we got sort of our next steps, I think. Like, we've got a goal to move closer to standardized and interoperability of posts with a sort of like digitally native networked form. And we're gonna do that through an activity where we're gonna look at each, like I guess we're gonna pair off sort of thing, or like assign someone's post from Game04.
Since there's 5, I mean, everybody could do a unique one. I think we could also just sort of like point to the right node, and then that way, yeah, you like get a whole cohesiveness to it. Pairing, I think, could be interesting, but that way, I think the math like is a little rougher. Yeah, and this way, there's also a sense of like interconnectedness that I like. It's like this ring.
Like a circle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pick them on.
So let's see. I'll just look at my screen. CJ to Kristen to Shahruz to John to Dave. Does that work? I don't know. I'll look at this.
Got it down.
CJ. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Are we all in the same order on each other's screens?
No, I was writing down what you were saying.
Okay. Unless someone has a certain persons that they really want to look at.
They're all fascinating. Can't wait.
I think they're all.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so what particularly are we doing?
So finding commonalities in structure, not content. So we're looking, so like Dave, you're looking at CJ's posts.
Yeah.
And you're gonna read them, so you're gonna get the content, but you're gonna look at, first of all, like what metadata is explicit, like he's made it obvious, like he's displaying it, or on the back end, like looking at what he's doing there.
Sure.
But then also maybe there's things in there that there are commonalities that start to emerge when you look at a few of his posts, and you're like, oh, he's also doing this thing that's not explicit, but like implied, like structure.
Pattern analysis.
Yes, and then how that might, and this is where I have this written down, so I'll kind of put it together, how that could be used to like plug into something interoperable, like more standardized, so that we can relate the posts to each other.
How can it be translated and converted and transmogrified into like other people's presumable similar descriptions of metadata?
An interoperable cell membrane.
Yeah, primitives and relationships between primitives. Like that's like, we're not, I mean, I don't think the assignment, as it were, is not to define what the primitives are and how they interoperate, but how they could be and could interoperate, like just through your perspective, because there's no right answer right now.
Yeah. Sure. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to continue posting too, to get in the habit of just dumping stuff in there, like, and playing with other types of forms. Because so right now I'm working with just like as primitive as possible with no like second order thing, not even linking or anything. So, yeah, I'm curious if like continuing to do this, then potentially like, sprucing up the display a little bit, something like that. I think it's a good practice for me. So
ease into it.
Yeah, because I usually figure like in any medium, like I like to do a thing where I'm just consistently hitting that medium, like over, usually it takes like 90 days or so, depending on what it is. And then you get like this complexity emergence from just sitting in the thing and like getting comfortable. And then, you know, or I usually have a thing where I'm like, all right, well, let's take it this extra step, and it doesn't feel like any extra work or anything. So I want to play with that some to see what it's like in the repo. Anyway, so we'll see. I'm just letting everybody know that I'm going to be barfing out things in there. So
that's my plan as well.
Great.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'll go faster doing a more collective thing.
What do you mean? Like
Yeah,
having
like-
boundaries on posting rather than just ambiently dumping crap in there?
Yeah, well, with the introduction of games, like if
Sure.
that, yeah. Do games help? Like this is like, I mean, this is our working hypothesis that designing
Yeah.
games where there's some sort of constraint and like can help. I don't know if it's expedite, but it can help clarify. I mean, it isn't. There is an expediting function here. Like you can arrive at not conclusions, but I don't know. You maybe see things more clearly than you would over a.
Yeah, it's a forced clarity thing. I mean, this is what Shahruz was talking about, like doing a more constrained, like, you know, everybody do, you know, post something of some type that is related to the standard that we're talking about doing. I don't know if we're ready to do that yet. I mean, we could do another, like make one thing within a type of content constraint.
Well, is this analysis, this next analysis that we're undertaking, I mean, is this game 5 or is this a continuation of game 4? Or, I mean, not that the difference matters that much, but like, I am seeing like a bit of a distinction between, you know, if Dave continues just posting posts, like that's kind of out of game, and there may be content that's more in game. But then there's also kind of like an overarching game here as well that like fits everything into it. So like could both kind of coexist, like this more targeted focused like mode of creation, and just like, you know, just random things from Telegram flying in, and random hypothesis annotations that kind of create like background noise for like behind the games themselves.
Yeah, I think, well, so I think what we're doing with this like pattern analysis round, this is another like, you know, it's like the black box or whatever. Like we're creating another game mode that can be a building block in future game design. And we're demoing it with the content that we've created. Usually it'll probably be on the heels of like a round of content creation or thinking or something like this. You know, you've got a pile of media across a bunch of people, and then you play a round of pattern analysis, and there can probably be a bunch of different variables on that spit out something. We're going to find out what it spits out. So I think in that sense, this is a continuation of the experiment of game 4. And then, yeah, I didn't think about, since we've been dumping everything in game 4, like where the rest of this goes. Maybe I'll just hold off on spamming the repo, but
just spam it.
Or tag it as something else. Yes,
yeah,
or tag
put
it
it somewhere else. Yeah,
I'm
CJ's a
spamming
spammer.
the shit out of it. I'm spamming the shit out of it. I wrote a spam bot.
There we go.
I think CJ had mentioned the idea of putting up an organization too, which may just create like, I don't know, it could be a game repo. That's the site, and then the separate repo. I don't know. That's cool. Maybe
that could actually that could be quite nice.
I'm happy to. Anybody wants to organize this thing, I will just tell me where to go, and I'll do it there. Can you convert like an existing account to an organization? How does that work? Do you know?
I think you just create an organization for free, and then you transfer the repo to that organization.
Okay,
that repo settings page.
Yeah. All right, we'll do that.
Yeah, actually, I looked at it slightly. I think the name Buzzard is taken, so I don't know if there's another other organization name that we can use instead, but
we'll probably use Relational OS for the overarching organization or something, or whatever you want to use. And then Buzzard is like our little crew within it, because I can see there being other crews that are working on it. I mean, I hope like Falcon and Vulture,
Flamingo,
mostly bird based.
Vulture, mostly bird based.
Emu.
Oh, I thought you were naming people that you knew. Say, wow.
I've got a bunch of cool friends. They're mostly birds. They're bird species.
I was just picturing they were like DJs or something. I don't know. And then Vulture.
DJ Vulture. Yeah. Not that cool. I mean, I did hang out in like punk rock, and everybody had like punk rock names, like, you know, Spit and like Dirt and Rat, you know, these kinds of things. Yeah. I think my punk rock name was like Floppy Disk.
Nice.
Worked well enough. Okay. Do the organization thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll just keep poking away at the thing, and then like we'll get emergent organization, hopefully, because it'll be intolerable at some point here. Yeah. All right, so we're doing the analysis thing. Do we want to do another like focus post, or the analysis thing is that's plenty?
So it
or
sounds
we land
like
on that?
the analysis thing is like Game04 phase 2 sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we got the ring of review, and then I've got some notes about what we're doing, and we're blackboxing it, so we're not going to share the post until right before we talk. Is that, Dave, you said that? Black box? Does that feel right?
I just mentioned it is like the black box. I don't know if we want to do that or not.
Yep. I mean, both.
I think it makes sense for this.
Sense.
Yeah.
So whatever analysis you do, don't share it until we talk, or right before we
Pattern
talk.
analysis black box. See, we're starting to get hybrid forms here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Is there a general form or template or something that we're all working off of, or how free form is this? Or blank restriction? I don't know.
How much constraint do we want to put on it? Markdown, I think, yes.
I mean,
Well,
but here's like, what if somebody wants to record a video, like a loom, like going through the other posts and sort of like drawing up little bits and pieces? Like, I feel like that could work as well. But then, you know, translating that to text could be like you transcript would never be helpful, but maybe like a summary, like a condensed summary to go with it.
Yeah, I can see myself probably unpacking everything and then sketching. That's usually how I do this, like listing out stuff, and then probably from that, like either talking it out via video or doing a quick write-up. So I don't know,
maybe the constraint is you have some synopsis or conclusion of what you're finding that can be consumed in like about 5 minutes, so that if we get together and then share, so it could be any media type, but it's not going to take people 30 minutes to get through, because if we're blackboxing and then doing unboxing together.
Zoomed in 5 minutes.
Little like fractal boxes could take a while to undo.
So a 5-minute digestible form. I mean,
in whatever medium.
Cross media, I guess, if that works.
Just have like a URL essentially at the end of it that points to buzzard.life and everything in that one post, but that could like link out to things, and that's just the little container.
Cool.
Sweet.
Makes good sense here.
Another one agreed upon.
What is thickness? Sorry. I got really caught up on thickness earlier. I just like heard thickness and I was like, I'm like, everything is thickness.
What is thickness? I missed this.
Well, in relation to, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it seems like it was mentioned a couple times. It was mentioned like twice. in the last like half hour or something, and I think I was struggling a lot with thingness because my bot is basically spitting out thingness. And I'm like, what is going on? It's just spitting out a number and a markdown file. And I'm like, but I have no idea what this is until I click on it. And I'm like, I need a better way of representing this information. And that's like where metadata and stuff is like, how do you even get the metadata in there is like a problem.
Well, that's I mean, you're describing thingness. What is
Thingness.
so like, what is the minimum quantity of a self-organizing system until it has a thingness quality to it? So like you have like, you know, a multi-cell organism that is made up of all of these component parts or whatever, but there is some coordinated systematization that makes it a thing. And that thing has an interrelatedness with other types of things, and they operate in a certain type of way. They evolved in a certain way. Yeah. And so like, what is the boundary condition, and how do you know that boundary condition? And this is the philosophy you get down into the like, or Aristotle and science and all this other stuff can, you know, quantify and objectify things through their qualia, right? Or you can sense them. And then you have,
right? The essence of something. CJ, I'll send you, or I'll post something.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a bunch of schools on this. Yeah.
Okay. Sweet.
And then
Heidegger.
Dynamical thingness is a whole nother thing.
Heidegger
thingness.
Okay. Yeah, I need to understand thingness.
Well, you got to go understand no thingness.
No thingness. Very important. Very, very important.
Nothingness.
Yes.
Yeah. This is there's like a huge sort of philosophical thing here between Eastern and Western traditions on this. Like, because in the sort of Western traditions, like nothingness, no thingness is empty, void, nihilism, like it's meaninglessness. But then you have the sort of cyclical, everything is nothing, nothing is everything in the Eastern traditions. And so no thingness is fullness. It is just a representation of the absolute and these kinds of, I don't know. There's a bunch of mind fuckery in there. So that has something to do with the internet, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we feel like we're moving in a direction here? What's the feedback on that?
I'd say the propeller is certainly turning.
Okay.
Where we're going is like yet to be determined, but
all right.
Like,
making sure
definitely
everybody's
moving
having
somewhere.
fun.
But we're spinning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wake is being left.
All right. Yeah, I have nothing to really compare this kind of thing to outside of like sort of being around musicians or artists like who are just sort of playing around trying to find a form or a sound or something, and like you know, you sort of just keep throwing stuff out, and this is what it kind of feels like to me, that like there's instrumentation here, and like everybody has like sort of a key they're working in, and I can feel it kind of coming together, but I have no idea. So that's my felt sense. And
wait,
I don't
that's
know,
like oh shit. That's just really cool. I don't know. It's neat that that's like the way that you're thinking about it.
Well, there's these little moments where we start to fall into a rhythm or whatever, or somebody produces something and then like helps everybody else see it, you know? Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It's different than being in like a sort of commercial endeavor environment where like you need to constrain for output because you need to get paid and there's deadlines and stuff like this. So I like spend half the time freaking out because I'm like, oh, you just need to constrain this and fucking get something out the door.
Same.
But then what?
Yeah.
Then we'll have something that anybody could make. I don't know.
A good old paperclip maximizer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm having a great time. Thank you all.
Yes.
Cool.
Going great.
All right. Well, anything else?
Shall we tentatively plan on next Monday, same time?
Yeah, timing.
Sure.
Next Monday.
Cool.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, then.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thanks, everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks,
Great chatting with y'all. My brain
care.
is fried.
See you in the repo.
Walk. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.